Hello and welcome to this weapon rigging tutorial. Now let's get started. As you see the scene here already, what I've done to it is, as personal preference, I've gone to the overlays here and unchecked the floor so that I can show you everything precisely. So, to create an armature, first things first, we press Shift A, armature, just right here, click on it, and now we may not see the armature here, right? But if you go to here, Object Data Properties, and click on it, and click on Viewport Display, and select In Front, you'll eventually notice that the bone is visible. Now, we don't want to display it as octahedral, so I'm going to select B-bone, as it will allow us to also customize the size later down the line in edit mode. Here's a rule of thumb for rigging weapons such as rifles and SMGs and so on. I would personally see that having the pivot point, which is the main bone, around these areas, so around the receiver, and you could have it either here, here, or here. But I personally would have here because, for this weapon's case, it may differ, and it all depends on the type of weapon that you have. So an SMG could perhaps be right on the center. If it's longer rifle, it could be here, or it could be here. And as I said, it all depends. If you have a pistol, then I would suggest using the pistol grip area as a placement for the pivot bone. I find that it works best, and it makes it easier for animators to work with. Alrighty, now let's get to the rigging process. And to do that, we press Tab to go into edit mode. Now, what I'm going to do is I'll go to the orthographic view, and I'm going to press on numpad 3, so I can have it like this on the side, and just like that. So I'm going to select this bone here, and I'll move it around here. So as to scale, just like that, and we want to make that thicker. So in order to do that, we press Ctrl-Alt-S, and just move the mouse till we like it. So I think this is good enough for it. It's a block, doesn't matter. And now we're going to duplicate this by pressing Shift D and moving it over here. By the way, if you want to toggle between wireframe mode and rendered mode, you press Shift Z. So by pressing it, you can toggle between it. And if you press Alt Z, Alt Z, or Alt Z, that's for X-ray mode. Now I'm going to the wireframe mode here, and I want to align the bone here. It doesn't have to be 100% accurate, just enough that it makes sense. And I'm going to select the head here and press G and Z so I can move it down a little bit. And now if I click on it, the body here, and if I press Ctrl-Alt-S and scale it just like that, it's going to appear thicker once we get out of here, but you can also make it thinner. So if you press Ctrl-Alt-S and then X, and just like that, you can control its thickness, just like that. All right, now that we have the magazine and the main bone here, let's move on to the mag release here, or the magazine release. Another cool trick I wanted to show you guys is that if I press Tab to get out of edit mode and click on the mesh and go into edit mode by pressing Tab again, is that if we go here and find somewhere in the model an area or a pivot point where it would make sense for the magazine release to rotate and so on, then we would select it. So now that we have wireframe mode on, again, as I said, Shift Z to toggle between them. And what I'm gonna do here is I have this part here, and by the way, the selection mode here is set to vertex. So 1, 2, 3 is how you can swap between selection modes. I right now have it on vertex, so just keep in mind. I want to select the cylinder here, so what I'm going to do is hover my mouse over one of the vertices here and press L. So L is select linked, and it selects the linked object. And now if I hold Shift S and click on cursor to selected, it's going to put the 3D cursor here in the center of that cylinder. Now, if I go out of edit mode by pressing Tab again and go to my armature and go into edit mode with that, and if I press Shift A which creates another bone. So to add bones, Shift A, by the way, and if you click on here, and what we want to do here is rotate it. And before we do that, we go to the transform pivot point here, click on that, set it to 3D cursor, so that when we rotate this bone to Y axis by 90 degrees, it rotates from the 3D cursor, and that 3D cursor acts as a pivot point. Keep in mind that wherever the 3D cursor is, if you press Shift A, so for example, if I put this 3D cursor here and press Shift A, it will create the bone wherever the 3D cursor is located. Okay, I hope you take that and keep it in mind. All right, so what I'm gonna do here is another cool trick I want to show you is if I change this again back to meridian point. If you see this horseshoe icon, click on it. It's called snapping. So this is the snapping mode. And if I click here, which gives us options to snap to, and I want to click on vertex. And now if I select the tail here, the tail of this bone, and if I press GX and hover my mouse on one of the vertices, it's going to snap to it. So I'm going to do the same here with the head, GX, and just like that. All right, so I'm going to scale this up. So by pressing Control Alt S, just like that, I made it a little bit fatter. And we can then scale this on the x-axis, just like that, so it's a little bit visible. There we go, that's the mag release right there. Now, we want to do the same thing where we would find a spot that makes sense for the pivot point. So for the trigger, I'm going to take this cylinder, and as again, if I press L for select linked, if I hold Shift S for the pie menu, and hover on cursor selected and let go of the buttons, it's going to put the 3D cursor here. So now we're going to do the same step, and instead of making the bone again, I'm going to duplicate this and move it here. And I forgot to disable that, so make sure to disable this. The shortcut key for it is Shift Tab to toggle it on and off. So now I have it off. Now I want this bone to snap to that 3D cursor. So to do that, we hold Shift S and then selection to cursor. Cool. Now we have that here, and if I toggle again, Shift Tab for the snapping mode, and move this to the x-axis, just like that, and select the head again, and move it on along the x-axis again, and just like that. And voila, there we have it. We have the magazine, the mag release, the trigger, and the main bone, and we're going to the lever selector here. I'm going to just do some guesswork, and if I hold Shift and right click, the 3D cursor is going to be here, and it's not going to be very accurate, but oh well. This is just a learning process. You can later adjust it as much as you like. And if I go here again by switching, and if I if I duplicate this and Shift S, selection to cursor, and just move it where it makes sense. So here we have it, and let's move on to the other areas. So here is the charging handle or the bolt handle, and I want to take this and make the bone for it. So what I would do is I'm gonna press L for select linked, and then press Shift H to hide. And now that I have this here, what I'm going to do is I press numpad 1 for front view, Alt A to deselect everything, Shift H to go to wireframe mode, and if I press B for box selection and just highlight this tip of the bolt handle, and if I hold Shift S and cursor to select it just like that, and if I press Tab to get out of this and go to the armature here, create the bone by pressing Shift A, and if I enable in front again and scale this up, I have the snapping mode enabled. I'm going to scale this up here and then this to the bottom, so Shift H. I took the tail here And if I press G, Z, and just have it on one of the vertices here, just like that, that's more precision. If I press Ctrl Alt S to scale this to make it thicker, you can then take this and move it down. So for this case, for my case, it's vertical. For your weapon, it might be horizontal. It might be pointing out here, like an AK, for example. So there it is. That's the bolt handle or the charging handle. You can call it whatever you like. And now I go to the safety lever. So I press Tab, and then fortunately for me, there is a good model here, mesh part, that I can use as its pivot point. So I press L, Shift S, cursor selected. And then what I'm going to do is I go to edit mode and select the bones here. One of these bones are ready, and just Shift D, Shift S, selection cursor. And I'm going to move this to the x-axis just like that, so I can have the option here. Now I'm going to take an extra step, and I'm going to rig this side folding stock. So I'm going to do that, and instead, so I'm gonna press L for linked, select linked, Shift S, cursor to cursor selected. But here's a problem that I have, and it's not in the center. So what I would do is press Shift H to hide the unselected, and I'm going to select the top part here, and here's a pro gamer move that I'm going to do. So if I press Control plus, just like that, it highlights incrementally. Or if you want to reverse the effect, what you would do is press Control and minus, and just like that. But I'm going to press plus so I can hide these. Now I'm going to press L again and Shift S, and then let it go just like that to cursor selected. And now if I press Alt H, hide everything, get out of edit mode for the object and go to edit mode for the armature. And I'm just gonna actually just make a new bone just like that, and move the head to the top area and the tail to the bottom. So I would say like here, that would suffice. And then Control Alt S to make it thicker, just like that. Perfect. So now we have the armature here done. We have the magazine, we have the charging handle, mag release, the pivot bone, the trigger, the safety lever, and lever selector. And of course, last but not least, the side folding stock. All right, so now that we have all of this done, let's go to edit mode and parent some of these parts. So I'm going to take the charging handle, the safety lever, the trigger, the mag release, lever selection or selector, and the side folding stock, and just click on the main bone. So I'm going to hold Control P and keep offset. And for the magazine, it's going to be a complete different story, as we're not going to parent to the main bone because we'll use a constraint for it later, and it's called child of constraint. And there's going to be an explanation as to why we use that. So what I wanted to say is that if your weapon's magazine has rounds on it, you can add another bone to this and parent that bone to the magazine. So let's say you're animating firing animation and you want to reload and have the mag look empty. So by rigging the bullets to that bone and just pushing it down, it's going to give that impression that, you know, oh, look, it's an empty mag. Thus, I had to reload. There we go. And you get the idea. So now that we have the parts here made, I want to duplicate this bone, and I'm going to scale it, Control S, scale it a little bit. And if I select this one and hide the rest by pressing Shift H and just lowering this a little bit down so that the bullets here, I'm going to parent this to the magazine. So keep offset, and there we go. If I go to pose mode by pressing Control Tab, whilst you're out of edit mode, by the way, and move it around. And if I move this around, there we go, we have everything set. Now it's time to name these bones. So I'm going to click on the main bone here. So F2 for renaming or giving names to your objects and bones and so on. So I'm going to call this main. And then this one is going to be called trigger. This one is the lever, safety lever. And this one is going to be the lever underscore selection. Did I name this one? Yes, I did. And this one is the magazine or mag underscore release. And this one is charging underscore handle, or if you want to call it bolt handle. So I'm going to call it the charging handle. Apologies if I made any spelling mistakes. And this one is side underscore folding underscore stock. Yes, I use underscores a lot, as you can notice. And this one is mag, and I'm going to call this mag underscore rounds. So there you go. And now we have named everything. You can check here the names for it if you want. Now let's get to the fun part, which is rigging or weight painting, assigning weights to this mesh. So to assign weights to this object, what I'm going to do is select the object, and then I'm going to hold shift and select the armature, and if I press Control P and set parent to, so this set parent to menu pops up, I'm going to select with empty groups. Now what this does is it's going to parent the gun to the armature, but here's the cool thing. If we go here to the object here, and if you go on where it says object data properties, it will show you the vertex groups here. If you have that minimized, you can collapse that, or you can expand that, and you can see that we have all of the vertex groups. Now this is the fun part. All right, let's get started. So if I select the mesh and go to edit mode, the vertex groups menu here changes, and you can see where it says assign, remove, select, and deselect. So this is where we assign weights or skin them, or in Maya, as some may refer to it as flooding. So we're going to flood weights to each bone individually here, or to vertex groups, and these vertex groups are named after the bones. And so this is a quick way of having vertex groups made instead of creating one by one and naming them after the bones. So here's a quick way of doing it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to hide the movable parts in edit mode, and so that whatever the rest is that isn't movable is going to be assigned to the main vertex group. So I'm going to select linked by pressing L on the trigger, the magazine release, there we go. We're just making sure that if there's anything that we missed, that we possibly missed here. Okay, good, nothing. So there you go. Now we press A to select all, and if I click assign, it's going to assign all of these weights to the main vertex groups. Now if I press Alt H, and then if I go here and select the main vertex group, it's going to show you all of the selected. So whenever we assign weights to each vertex group, we have the ability to select it, and if it highlights, it means that it's already weight painted. So I'm going to hide that, and now I'm going to focus on these parts individually. So the mag release, it's right here. I'm going to take this and go to the mag release vertex group, click assign, and then hide, and then go here to the trigger and assign and hide. And last but not least, the mag rounds. So I'm going to click assign and if I Alt H, head out of edit mode and unhide the armature, and if I move this around in pose mode, you can see that we have successfully rigged our gun, and congratulations, you have rigged your weapon. And just like that. So the reason why I didn't parent the magazine to the main bone is because I'm going to use a constraint called child of constraint. So in order to add that constraint, we go to the bone constraints properties menu, click on add constraint, and we're going to child of constraint, click on that, and we're going to highlight here the armature, and then I'm going to select the bone here, which is the main. Sometimes if it ends up messing, so let's say sometimes if you have the child of constraint and you happen to notice that your bone, for example, sometimes when you add the child of constraint and have selected the armature and the bone that you want to target, your magazine may be here or somewhere here. To fix that, we click on set inverse, and you can always do that by fixing it. So now if I move the main bone, it follows along, and this can be animated by having the influence set to 0. So this is handy for situations like, for example, let's say you want to animate a mag throw, and you basically can toggle this on and off, the influence, you can set it off, and here you can see animate property. So it has an animation property that you can enable that, and so this will give you the ability to do that without having to go through the hassle of rigging again and going through all that pain of just parenting this to the main bone. So child of constraint does that and it helps you a lot.
Did you find this video helpful? Make sure to join the mother base by hitting the subscribe button, leaving a like and a comment down below, or else I'll